I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places. Senorita stay and caballeros sigh.
There was a time not too long ago when music wasn't something you scrolled past in a playlist. It wasn't in your earbuds or waiting quietly in the background of a grocery store. In the 1940s, music lived in the airwaves, floating out from polished wood cabinets, from jukeboxes glowing in diners, from distant radios crackling beside army bunkers. You didn't just hear a song, you felt it in the room. Imagine the soft hum of a living room on a quiet evening. The lights are dim to conserve electricity during blackout drills, and the smells of dinner still linger in the air. A family gathers around a hulking radio set, its dials glowing amber. The voice of a crooner comes through, rich and close, as if he's just around the corner. Outside, there may be headlines of war and rations, but in that moment, there's only melody. Radio was the lifeline. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a connection. It brought laughter, news from across the ocean, and songs that stitched together everyday moments. Swing music pulsed through supper clubs where men in crisp suits danced with women in silk gloves. Big band tunes rolled through open car windows on summer roads, and far from home, soldiers carried tiny notebooks where they'd scribble lyrics that reminded them of loved ones back home. Music in the 1940s was woven into the fabric of life. It echoed through train stations and church basements, echoing off the walls of USO dance halls. Each song had its place, an anchor for a memory, a name, a year. Some of those songs still echo, shimmering softly in our collective mind, but many have become quiet, left behind in attic trunks and dusty record sleeves. Today, we turn the dial back, to remember not just the chart toppers, but the songs time didn't carry forward, the ones you might have once hummed without knowing the name, the forgotten hits of the 1940s, still waiting to be heard once more. If you felt something today, a memory, a melody, a moment you thought you forgot, then these songs did their job. Let us know which one struck a chord with you in the comments below. And if you want more strolls down memory lane, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who remembers. Because sometimes, going back is the only way forward. Until next time, let the music play. It wasn't just a song playing on the radio. It was more like someone speaking directly to your heart. I'll Be Seeing You, first brought to life by the emotional pull of Tommy Dorsey's orchestra and Frank Sinatra's unmistakable voice, became something far bigger than a musical hit. It was a goodbye in melody, a promise disguised as a lullaby. Originally published in 1938 by Sammy Fain and Irving Kahal, the song didn't rise to its fullest meaning until the world began sending its sons and brothers to war. By the early 1940s, I'll Be Seeing You had found its moment. Its simple lyrics, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places, suddenly mirrored a truth too many were living. And as FM waves drifted into kitchen radios and portable record players hummed beside packed suitcases, this song became an unofficial anthem for those left behind. You might picture a young woman on a train platform, her gloves in one hand, a folded letter in the other. Or a soldier, crouched beneath a canvas tent overseas, listening to a familiar voice slip through static from home. This wasn't just a soundtrack. It was a lifeline between people stretched across continents. And even long after the war, the song left traces. It slipped quietly into films, from The Notebook to The Aviator, used in scenes that always seemed to hold more than just dialogue. Echoes, memories, echoes again. Sinatra would record it again in his twilight years, his voice older, softer, as if returning to something he never quite left behind. Maybe that's why it still lingers. Not loud, but gently, like a postcard kept in a drawer, edges yellowed, corners curled, still carrying the scent of longing and the sound of someone waiting. There's something about the first few notes of Amapola that feels like opening a window in springtime. Soft air drifting in, curtains billowing slightly, the world slowing down. In 1941, Jimmy Dorsey's orchestra recorded this song with singers Bob Eberly and Helen O'Connell, and all across America, the sound of Latin sway began to bloom in a time that desperately needed beauty. The song itself wasn't new. It had been written years earlier by Spanish composer José María Lacalle García and had made quiet ripples throughout Europe and South America. But when Dorsey's version arrived, complete with bilingual elements and a gentle bolero rhythm, it brought something unexpected into the American living room, a foreign warmth wrapped in familiar crooning charm. You might remember the version where Eberly would deliver the first part in English, rich and polished, before Helen O'Connell's voice arrived like a soft breeze answering him in Spanish. It wasn't just a duet. It was a dance, a playful back and forth that filled dance halls with smooth footwork and glowing eyes. For a few minutes, whether you were in Kansas or Queens, the world didn't feel quite so heavy. And the timing mattered. In 1941, the headlines were darkening. Troops trained, families waited. But then a song like Amapola came through the radio and changed the room. It didn't ignore the world. It simply offered a different view, like looking out the window and seeing something blooming despite the storm. It wasn't the biggest hit of the decade, but for many, it was the most unexpected. A reminder that even in wartime, your feet could still move, your heart could still drift toward the sound of a love song in a language you didn't need to understand to feel. If you closed your eyes in 1942 and let the needle drop on a record, you might have heard a voice like warm velvet wrapped around a candle flame. Vaughn Monroe didn't shout through his songs. He whispered through them, carrying words across miles, across oceans. And in My Devotion, you could feel every mile in between. Written by Harold Jacobson and Rock Hillman, the song spoke directly to hearts that were waiting. At home, young women would hear it play on late-night radio when the house was quiet and darker moods could settle in. Monroe's voice floated just above a gentle orchestra, full of strings that seemed to sway like porch curtains in the night wind. His delivery wasn't about hope or heroics. It was about steadfastness, the slow-burning kind that sits inside you like a prayer. The lyrics were simple, but that was their power. My devotion, he sang, is endless and deep as the ocean. And for listeners separated by war, those words gave shape to something that couldn't always be spoken aloud. This was a kind of music that didn't need volume, it needed faith, not in big ideas, but in tiny, personal truths. That someone was waiting, that someone was holding on. Vaughn Monroe's style made him a standout. While others dipped into brass-heavy swing and fast chatter, he leaned into the slow and sincere, always just under the tempo of the world. Maybe that's why My Devotion didn't explode. It just endured, quietly tucked into nightstands, remembered in the silence between letters, or sung softly by someone peeling potatoes, all in the glow of a kitchen radio that, for just a few minutes, made someone feel a little less alone. If you ever sat beside a loved one and felt the hush between words say more than the words themselves, then you already understand what "there are such things" was trying to say. It came quietly in 1942, carrying on the confident shoulders of Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, but the feeling it delivered came from somewhere far deeper. The voices belonged to the Pied Pipers, and the arrangement seemed to glide, like leaves floating down a calm stream. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't ask for attention. It simply reminded you that gentleness still existed. There are such things, they sang, as a dream for two. And in a time when so many dreams were being put on hold, that message hit gently, then firmly, right in the heart. You might remember how this one felt like it was being sung straight into your living room, through the soft hum of a floor model radio, or from the corner speaker of a USO dance. Young soldiers barely out of school would hear it and think of a jacket left on a back porch, or a smile caught in the mirror before saying goodbye. Letters stained with cologne and neatly folded into shirt pockets seemed to echo its chorus. This wasn't just a love song, it was an act of faith stitched into music, that the world could still be beautiful, that warm hands, soft lighting, and peaceful nights would return. That whispering, "I love you," into the stillness wasn't foolish, it was brave. Years later, older couples would dance to it in quiet clubs, remembering steps they'd nearly forgotten. And the song would still be there, unchanged, a quiet thread of reassurance tying the past to the present across every forgotten moment in between. And then, just when things felt heavy with longing and hushed goodbyes, a new rhythm came tumbling through the speakers, bold, buoyant, and bright as sunlight spilling across a dance floor. Brazil, performed by Xavier Cugat and his orchestra, didn't arrive politely. It burst through, like a breeze from somewhere far away, full of life and motion. Originally titled Aquarela do Brasil, the tune came from Brazilian composer Ari Barroso, who painted a musical picture of his homeland that danced with every note. But when Cugat brought it stateside in 1943, he added his own Latin flair, winding horns, percussive flourishes, and melodies that felt more like a celebration than a song. Suddenly, American audiences were swaying to a rhythm unlike anything they'd heard before. At a time when war maps dominated newspapers and uncertainty loomed in every corner of daily life, Brazil offered something else entirely: movement, richness, color, something from beyond the horizon. People who'd never left their hometowns found themselves tapping to a beat that felt international, exotic, full of story. It reminded listeners that the world was bigger than battles, that joy still existed somewhere, and sometimes it could even find its way into your living room. Cugat was known for this talent, mixing cultures and sounds with easy confidence, making foreign melodies feel like old favorites. And Brazil was one of his gifts that stuck. It climbed the charts and filled dance halls, with couples spinning faster, dressed in light yellows and soft blues, their laughter matching the tempo. The song's joy wasn't careless. It existed alongside fear, not in place of it. But for just a couple of minutes, it lets people travel, if not by plane or ship, then through rhythm. A memory that sways even now, like a hammock strung between two palm trees, far from worry, close to music. There was a kind of truth tucked quietly into certain 1940s songs, the ones that didn't scream or shine too brightly, but simply sighed along with you. "You Always Hurt the One You Love" by the Mills Brothers was one of those. It drifted through easy melodies, but landed right where it hurt. Maybe that's why people kept playing it, especially when no one else was around. Released in 1944, the song buckled heartbreak and humor into the same soft tune. Its lyrics felt like something overheard across a kitchen table, said carefully but still wounding. You always hurt the one you love, the one you shouldn't hurt at all. Paired with the Mills Brothers' clear harmonies, so gentle you could almost see the breath between syllables, it became a subtle anthem for mistakes made close to home. Wartime didn't only leave marks overseas. At home, relationships stretched and strained. Letters took weeks, sometimes months to arrive. News came in snatches. Even those who stayed behind were fighting invisible battles: loneliness, fear, doubt. And this song seemed to cradle all of that with an understanding wink. It didn't scold, It confessed. You might picture a young wife standing by the kitchen sink in her house dress, a half-empty cup of coffee going cold next to her, or a husband listening alone, knowing the words applied to him too. Rain tapping on the window, the world quiet except for this voice on the radio, telling the truth they hadn't wanted to say aloud. The Mills brothers had a way of making such moments feel manageable, not by solving them, but by hearing them, by singing gently about the things we sometimes do to the people we love, without ever quite intending to. By the time 1947 rolled around, the haze of war was clearing, and America's taste in music was shifting. Laughter had crept back in, not just the gentle kind, but the belly-deep sort that came with relief. And into that air of rebuilding and release came Tex Williams, strumming his guitar with a sideways grin and a song that didn't tug at heartstrings. It tickled them. Smoke, smoke, smoke. That cigarette was part comedy, part complaint, and it caught fire in a way few novelty songs ever had. Backed by the Western Caravan and a bouncing beat that straddled swing and country, the song used talking blues style, a rhythmic, almost spoken delivery that made every line feel like it was being delivered to you by a neighbor leaning across the fence. It wasn't about dancing close. It was about holding a mirror up to a room lit by ashtrays and elbow patches, where someone always seemed to be lighting up just when they were needed. Tex told the tale like an old cowboy with too much charm to argue with. A man can't propose, can't win a hand of poker, can't do anything, you guessed it, until he's finished a cigarette. And while it seems like good fun, there was a truth hiding in the joke. America was trying to understand its habits. The soldiers had come home, but they brought their rituals with them, smoking being one of the most common. It became a massive hit, topping the Billboard chart for 6 straight weeks, perhaps because it didn't take itself seriously, or maybe because it did take everyday life seriously, but chose to smile about it. In a decade filled with ballads of aching hearts and distant wars, Tex Williams reminded everyone that humor too has its place in surviving the hard times. At first, it just sounded fun. A light tropical rhythm, a bounce in the melody, and the unmistakable cadence of the Andrews sisters harmonizing about bright days and island drinks. Rum and Coca-Cola seemed like a vacation in a song, something to tap your toe to, or whistle while folding laundry. It swept through radios in 1945 with all the joy of post-war celebration. But songs, like cocktails, can have stronger ingredients than they seem, and this one had more in it than soda and song. Written originally by Trinidadian calypso artist Lord Invader, the tune had roots grounded in commentary, not just catchy hooks. It spoke of American soldiers stationed in the Caribbean during World War II, bringing with them not just money and energy, but their culture, their desires, and their weight. Behind the cheerful rhythm were lines about local women working for the Yankee dollar, lines that hinted at something far heavier than a holiday romance. When the Andrews sisters recorded the Americanized version, penned by Maury Amsterdam and sold to Decca Records, it became an instant hit. The simmering steel drum feel, fused with American big band polish, caught fire. It hit #1 on Billboard and stayed there for 10 weeks. But litigation soon followed as Lord Invader sued for uncredited use of his work, and won. Still, the song spread, far beyond its controversy. It played on kitchen radios, in schoolyards, at seaside jukeboxes. Most heard only the surface: girls, dancing, drinks, and rhythm. But others paused, especially in later years, and heard more: echoes of colonialism, of women marginalized yet central, of joys transformed into commerce. It was a tune born from contrast. Even now, it brings a smile. But behind that smile is a reminder that music sometimes carries the weight of history while still managing to lift us off our feet. The first sound is a cheerful leap, almost like someone opening a window to let in the morning air. In 1940, Judy Garland stood at that open window and sang out with a sparkle, "It's a great day for the Irish," and for many, it truly felt that way. Premiering in the film Little Nellie Kelly, the song arrived with Garland's voice full of pride, wit, and just enough twinkle to keep it light on its feet. But underneath the lilting melody and playful lyrics was something weightier, a sense of identity. For the millions of Irish Americans who had spent generations walking a balance beam between assimilation and heritage, Garland's anthem felt like a stamp of belonging. It wasn't just about parades or shamrocks. At a time when cities swelled with immigrants hoping to blend and survive, being Irish was complicated. It meant pride, but also struggle. And yet, here was Judy, America's sweetheart, draped in emerald, casting Irishness not as a shadow from the past, but a bright light for the present. The song caught on quickly, especially around St. Patrick's Day. Radios across the country would cue it up as green and gold streamers fluttered from street lamps and marching bands warmed up their horns. Families who still had black and white photos of the old country tucked in drawers listened with misty eyes. To some, it was just a jaunty tune with clever rhymes. To others, it was home, sung aloud. Garland had a gift for bridging personal stories with public celebration, and in this case, she gave voice to a kind of quiet pride, one that perhaps hadn't found its song until that day. A great one indeed for the Irish, and for anyone who remembered where they came from. There's a warmth that lives in the song Tangerine. Not a heat, but a softness, like sunlight slanting through a window at the end of the day. When Jimmy Dorsey's orchestra recorded it in 1942, along with Helen O'Connell's velvety tones weaving through Bob Eberly's tenor, they didn't just make a hit, they captured the color of a memory. It begins with that gentle sway, a melody that feels like it belongs on an open veranda or drifting through a ballroom as couples move in slow rhythm. Tangerine, she is all they claim. The lyrics speak of a woman, sure, but what listeners heard was more than that. They heard longing, escape, elegance wrapped in melancholy.
The world outside at the time was far from dreamy. The war loomed large. Letters from overseas came stained with sea salt and worry, and futures felt uncertain. But this song offered a canvas of calm, and for 3 fleeting minutes, it transported you somewhere warmer, a place where laughter echoed off stone patios and glasses clinked quietly in the distance. Jimmy Dorsey, always with a gift for pairing jazz structure with radio sensibility, brought sophistication to the mass market. And Tangerine showed how deeply people crave something beautiful in their ears, something soothing, yet not empty. It topped charts, yes, but more importantly, it settled into people's lives. Played during dinners, slow dances in tight living rooms, or while folding laundry on a rainy afternoon. Even if you haven't heard it in a while, the moment the first bars return, you know. It's the song that doesn't hurry, it doesn't ask. It simply reminds you there's still sweetness in the world. And sometimes, it comes in the color of a fading sky. If you ever looked at an old photo of a young man in uniform and wondered what he was thinking, not just about war, but about home, about being ordinary, then you already understand the heart of Johnny Zero. Released in 1943 by the Song Spinners, this quiet but powerful tune carried something different in its melody. It wasn't grand, it wasn't full of brass or high drama, but its message wrapped itself around America like a favorite sweater, soft, familiar, and deeply personal. The song was inspired by John D. Foley, a real-life gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces. He entered combat with no prior official training, a true underdog, and quickly earned recognition for both his bravery and accuracy. The military dubbed him Johnny Zero, a nod to the Japanese Mitsubishi fighter plane he helped fend off. And that name stuck. But what made the song special wasn't just its storytelling, it was its intention. Johnny got a 0, it begins, sounding like the start of a schoolyard scolding. But then it turns. He didn't get the hero's fame till he shot a 0 down. It took the image of childhood failure, getting a 0 on a test, and flipped it into something quietly triumphant. Boys with scraped knees and dreams too big for their bedrooms suddenly saw themselves in uniform, not as background characters, but as heroes in waiting. It caught on precisely because it didn't try too hard. It spoke to the kid at the soda fountain, the paper boy on the porch, the student daydreaming in the back row of class. Johnny 0 didn't raise a statue. Instead, it held up a mirror and reminded millions that greatness sometimes begins in the most ordinary corners. In 1947, just 2 years after the war had ended, America was trying to breathe again. Busy kitchens once filled with ration books were now bustling with baby bottles and high chairs. Soldiers had come home, and the quiet lull between hard chapters was suddenly filled with voices, tiny ones. And into this new noise came a song that sounded like a soft hug. Chi Baba, sung by Perry Como. It didn't march or swing. It rocked, gently, like a cradle. Built from a mixture of make-believe Italian baby talk and flowing melody, it was playful and sincere all at once. Chi Baba, Perry sang. My bambino, go to sleep. The lyrics didn't tell a grand story, but they didn't have to. They wrapped themselves around the listener like a warm blanket on a quiet evening. For many families, this song became part of a daily ritual. Mothers winding down a long day, fathers, many of them holding their babies for the first time, swaying slowly by the radio, humming along out of tune but on beat. It didn't matter. It was about being present. For a nation that had lived through absence, that feeling was everything. Como's delivery added to its lasting sweetness. Never in a hurry, never heavy. He made even nonsense syllables sound like a bedtime promise. Backgrounded by lush harmonies and soft instrumentation, this wasn't a song meant for the spotlight. It was meant for a small lamp in the corner of a nursery, casting a soft glow on the floor. It reached #1 on the charts, but more importantly, it found its way into the fabric of early post-war home life. A reminder that even after years of sacrifice, something as simple as a lullaby could carry a country forward, rocking it gently into the future, one sleepy chorus at a time. Every now and then, a song comes along that doesn't tug at your heart or poke at your conscience. It just makes you smile. In 1945, as the world dusted itself off and stood up straighter, Nat King Cole served something silly, smooth, and entirely delightful. It was called the Frim Fram sauce. Now, to be clear, no such sauce exists, and that's exactly the point. With his effortless vocal glide and jazz trio in sync, Cole delivered each absurd phrase with twinkling precision. I don't want no pork chop, he sang. All I want is Frim Fram sauce, with the Ausen Fay, with Chifafa on the side. What did it mean? Nobody knew, and nobody needed to. After years of war and worry, there was something comforting in hearing a man sing about nonsense food in the most soulful way imaginable. For audiences used to ration books where sugar, butter, even meat came with limits, the idea of chifafa and shafafa was joyful gibberish, a dream menu with no restrictions. It was indulgence without guilt, luxury without logic. Some interpreted it as metaphor, pining not for food, but for the finer things in life. Others thought it hinted at romantic appetite, cloaked in culinary code. But at its simplest, it was a song that said, let's not be serious today. A little jazz, a little grin, a lot of charm. Cole would go on to record countless classics, many dipped in romance and elegance, but the Frim Fram sauce held a different space. Less spotlight, more inside joke. A recipe for joy, served hot and unexpected. And even now, if you listen closely, you can still picture a cafe on a city street. Piano keys bouncing, waitresses laughing, and no one caring what the Frim Fram sauce really was. There's a kind of quiet comfort in a song that doesn't try to chase the sun. Instead, It sits down beside you in the rain. Into Each Life. Some Rain Must Fall, sung by Ella Fitzgerald and the Ink Spots in 1944, offered that exact kind of companionship. It wasn't about bright promises or dramatic endings. It was about the in-between, the weathered umbrella, the puddles you step around, and the feeling you carry when smiling doesn't come easy. The song begins with that unmistakable Ink Spots introduction, deep and steady, like worn shoes on a wet sidewalk. Bill Kenny's voice speaks more than sings, offering a truth as simple as it is universal. And then Ella steps in. Her tones light, clears a raindrop against glass. The two together feel like conversation, or maybe a letter exchanged across miles, during a time when many were too used to goodbyes. It was released during a stretch when the weight of the world pressed closely against everyday moments. People stood on street corners adjusting collars against the wind, or sat beside half-sipped mugs in quiet cafes, listening to radios for news and songs alike. And when this one played, it didn't offer escape exactly, it offered empathy. With lyrics like, "Into each and every life, some rain has got to fall." It gave listeners permission to feel blue without shame. But there's something else tucked inside the melody. Not just sorrow, but survival. The idea that the storm will pass, or at the very least, that someone else understands what it feels like to stand in it. Years later, it still plays softly in old diners, in moments of reflection, in movies needing just the right note of melancholy. Not to make us sad, but to remind us we've all been there. Shoulders damp, hearts heavy, and still moving forward, one careful step at a time. It's the kind of song you don't so much remember hearing. You remember how it made you feel. Let Me Call You Sweetheart had already traveled decades by the time Patti Page brought it into the 1940s, carrying with it the soft weight of generations who once danced to its melody. Originally published in 1910, it had lived 1,000 lives, played at weddings, whispered in courtships, hummed while hanging laundry on spring mornings. But when Patti Page revived it, something about her voice gave the song a second youth. Not a reinvention, just a gentle return. She didn't try to outshine its sentiment. She simply honored it. By the late 1940s, the pace of American life was shifting. But people still held hands across kitchen tables. They still slipped handwritten notes into coat pockets. Sweetheart was a word that hadn't worn out yet. And when she sang those first lines, "Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you," people felt permission to slow down just for a few minutes and remember what matters. You might picture a dance floor in a small town's firehouse, crepe paper streamers swaying slightly in the warm air, a veteran in uniform swaying with his wife who waited through years of silence, or an older couple listening from their porch swing, rocking gently, smiling without saying anything at all. It wasn't flashy and it wasn't new, but it didn't need to be. Some songs are like trusted keepsakes, velvet boxes, dried corsages, faded letters with hearts drawn in red ink. And when Patti Page sang it again, she reminded everyone that tenderness doesn't go out of style. It just waits quietly until someone decides to sing it again. Long before streetlights buzzed to life on their own, there was a man with a pole, a quiet silhouette at dusk, tipping his hat, straightening his coat, and raising the flame, one lamp at a time. That image, simple as it is, glows softly within the old lamplighter, a tune wrapped in warmth and wistfulness. Released in 1946 by Kay Kaiser and his orchestra, the song painted a portrait that must have already felt like a memory, even then. It spoke of a man who walked the streets not just to bring light, but to bring comfort. The lamplighter became a gentle symbol of a vanishing past, when evenings were slower, cities were smaller, and the world seemed somehow closer. You might remember the lyrics. He made the night a little brighter wherever he would go. Sung with sincere harmonies, it wasn't dramatic or grand. It was delicate, like candlelight on an old windowsill. Listeners didn't need to have lived in that specific time to feel the pull. They could imagine it. That was enough. Post-war America was yearning, not just for peace, but for something soft to hold on to. The pace of life was picking up. Neon signs replaced warm gaslight. Familiar jobs disappeared. But this song let people look back, not to escape the present, but to honor what had led them there. It's strange how quickly a profession or an entire way of living can become nostalgia. And yet, that's part of what makes music like this so powerful. It catches the flicker before it fades. Somewhere, deep in the heart of a quiet street, the old lamplighter still tiptoes through memory, leaving behind not just light, but a feeling. A soft needle drops. A gentle crackle rises. Somewhere between the hiss of dust and the first familiar note, time begins to slip again. Not quickly, not with force, but like sunlight crawling across a wooden floor. These songs, they didn't always top the lists that history tends to remember. They may not get replayed on classic stations or featured in documentaries, but that doesn't mean they're gone. You might still find them on brittle 70s eights in a shoebox marked Misc, or scratched into jukebox B-sides, barely legible from decades of fingerprints and heavy favorites. Yet, there they are. Each one we've just revisited carried its own small world. Judy Garland beaming in a green satin dress, soldiers swaying to Latin rhythms far from home, a lullaby floating through a nursery window. They weren't just songs, they were settings, chapters, keepsakes. Maybe you remember dancing with your mother in the kitchen to Vaughn Monroe's soft declarations, or watching your father drum his fingers to Tex Williams' steady charm. Perhaps you can still smell the Sunday roast from the next room, while Ella Fitzgerald sings about rain and falling. And even if you don't remember these moments firsthand, maybe you've seen the photos, faded corners curled up, or Polaroids with handwritten dates and someone's name almost forgotten. What matters is not that we recall every lyric. It's that something stirs when we hear just a few bars, a spark, a scent, a story. As we gently close the lid on this memory box, it's not with sadness, but reverence. These 1940s tunes may sit a little lower in history's stacks, but they sing louder in the hearts that still hold them. So, let the needle keep spinning. Let the room stay quiet for just another moment. And let the music, as it always has, bring you softly, tenderly back to yesterday.